What's up guys, this is a part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, I'm gonna go ahead and show that in the description below. And with that out of the way, intro! This video was brought to you by the wonderful people on screen here who support me over at Patreon. If you want to support this channel and what I do, then please check the link in the description or the link at the end of the video. Alrighty, before we get into the video, as usual, let's go through some fan art. We have first a Rule 63 Suris from Bubblin', a Sunset Suris from Atimo, and then a Dragon Suris from Gaelic Nox. As per usual, thank you all for your submissions, and let's get right into their video.
At this point, it's like moving to the courtroom scene, just like you talked about. A story is made up to explain the ideas, and just like in forensics, some stories or histories will fit better than others.
That's right. That's the debate. So right at the beginning of this email, it's clear that this person doesn't understand this basic concept of the origins debate. The debate is about different histories, not the science.
And as I pointed out in my last video, this is actually where you guys get everything wrong. The history is actually determined by the science when we're trying to figure out how old a fossil is, or perhaps what that fossil would have done. A fossil of any particular animal that happens to have claws and incredibly sharp teeth, we can go ahead and assume was probably an obligate carnivore. We can also, through radiometric dating, determine around how old this fossil is, which tells us what period it would have been in. Then, based on the location we find the fossil in and the period, we can now determine what its diet probably was, which will give us some clues as to how this animal comported itself during its daily lifestyle. Sometimes we might even find its prey fossilized near it, or in rare cases, we may even find digested remains that have also been fossilized. All of these things will help clue us into the history of an animal's life, but all of that is predicated on the science. You are trying to split these into two separate categories, whereas in reality, one is going to be predicated on the other. Unless you've got some, Precambrian historian who actually wrote all of this stuff down, which is something I highly doubt you have.
And the same is true of William Lane Craig's comments. As brilliant a debater as he is, and he is, he's missed this foundational aspect of the origins debate. He's commenting specifically on the related issue of the age of the Earth, which is very much a debate of different histories.
And if William Lane Craig decided that he wanted to defer to the experts in radiometric dating on the age of the Earth, since it's well outside of his scope, a lesson that I hope he took home after his debate with Sean Carroll, then the question remains, why do you guys not defer to the experts? I actually really like the analogy that Nicholas Suter drew when he was debating Kent Hovind recently. You wouldn't trust an atheist to tell you about the Bible. Likewise, you shouldn't trust a creationist to tell you about evolution. So I'm going to go ahead and take that principle and not trust a bunch of talk show hosts who are trying to tell me about the age of the Earth, especially when they can't back up their claim with anything except a genealogy and a book. Since we know the method is bunk, the only thing I can do is trust you guys at face value. And at face value, I would rather trust someone who actually has studied this, much in the same way that I would rather trust a biblical scholar to tell me about the history of the Bible faster than a random atheist. This isn't saying that the random atheist couldn't be right, and this isn't saying that the biblical scholar couldn't be wrong, but at face value, the likelihood of getting an accurate statement from either of these is going to be based on their field of expertise.
On this week's episode, our focus is on the often not so kind accusations that creationists are damaging Christianity, that we're making Christianity look like it's for unscientific, uneducated people, but that's not the case. No.
So continuing with the email, Robert says, science primarily does not have opinions. It has data. Data that does not give a living beep what anyone thinks. And the response from Dr. Jonathan Sarfati, who responded to this email online, he says, we agree that there is an objective reality that is independent of what anyone thinks. Postmodernism denies this. That is why science developed in a biblical creationist Christian worldview during the Middle Ages, but was stillborn in other worldviews.
Well, that's neat and all when talking about Dr. Jonathan Sarfati, and he actually does have a real PhD and has done real science. By trade, he was a physical chemist. He actually has several papers that are published in journals like Nature, which is why it's really strange to see him working at CMI. I did a little bit of digging, and it turns out that there's actually a feud between this guy and Ken Ham, strangely enough. Apparently, Answers in Genesis actually broke away from Creation magazine. That's neither here nor there, though. Apparently, Apparently, Dr. Jonathan wasn't able to do much in the Australian market, where CMI is located, so he's now trying to do public speaking stuff here in the US. Apparently, he's also had some run-ins with the National Center of Science and Education, wherein Eugene Scott and Glenn Branch ended up calling his Refuting Evolution 2 a crude piece of propaganda. And based on looking at his bibliography, it looks like the only things he's written outside of a couple of papers in Nature, which I am still going to give him credit for, are all young Earth creationist apologetics literature. From Refuting Evolution to the Genesis account to Christianity for Skeptics, By Design, Evidence for Nature's Intelligence Designer, The God in the Bible, it looks to me that this guy is pretty much only worried about being an apologist and making money as such. Not necessarily a refutation of his point, but it did give me a chance to do a little digging on him. Could be useful moving forward.
Right. In the article that you can look up online, by the way, at creation.com/damaging, Dr. Sarfati has included web links to other articles detailing what he just said about science arising within a biblical worldview and not other worldviews.
Wait, that was an outright lie. In the portion that you showed literally 3 seconds ago, he said that the scientific method was born from a biblical worldview, but it was also born in other worldviews. It's literally there in that quote. How dishonest do you have to be to contradict your previous statement immediately after showing it on screen? Assuming that you're working with a script and you have the ability to read the quote, you literally would have seen that from your teleprompter. But I guess the dishonesty is besides the point. There was a point in time, we're still kind of living in it, where Christianity happens to be the predominant religion in most of the first world. Given that that's the case, you would assume that we would get scientific data, research, and analysis from countries and organizations that are at least somewhat affiliated with that religion. These countries in the past were literally the countries that had the means and the wealth in order to create the type of academia that allows for scientific research to come about. This has everything to do with having the means and funding, and it has nothing to do with Christianity by itself. I'm not even really sure which way is better to tackle this from, so I went ahead and threw both in. On the one hand, a brief look at history shows that yes, the church predominantly was in control of many academic institutions, which is pretty much what we would expect. But on the other hand, you guys literally lied about the statement you just said with a straight face.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, we actually did a show on this last year called The Biblical Basis for Modern Science. Now that show is based on conclusions from secular historians of science who show that it was the biblical worldview that gave rise to science, much to the surprise of most people today.
Right, yeah, and some of those historians.
Right.
No, it just happened that countries that were predominantly Christian, or in some cases theocracies, were the countries that had the means to produce modern academia. Setting up infrastructure for schooling takes money, and in times gone past, trying to declare yourself as an atheist or any type of religious non, or even just any religion besides Christianity, could and did get you killed, meaning that the only worldview allowed amongst the proletariat was the Christian worldview. What other worldview do you expect to beget ideas when most of the first world only allows for one?
And now, just as a side note, it was that episode that was submitted to the International Christian Film Festival and got us nominated for Best TV Show, Creation Magazine Live, this year in 2018. Now, as we record this here today, we're not sure if we won yet. That's going to be announced in a couple of weeks. But it's nice to have the value of this show appreciated by other Christian filmmakers and those in Christian media.
Yes, I'm sure it is wonderful to have the value of your propaganda touted whenever you are talking to other propagandists.
Right. That is nice, but what we treasure even more than that is the effect that the show and the information we present has on you, the viewers.
Yes.
For some of you, you've told us that you were an atheist before watching the show, and the content helped you to recognize that the Bible is God's word and it's totally true.
I don't want to believe that for a second, but I'm also kind of pessimistic as to the state of the human race currently. We literally have unironic Nazis that are spouting all of the anti-Semitic talking points that would have put them very firmly in the Third Reich. And this is something that a lot of people end up defending because of free speech. So honestly, the fact that you've managed to convince some people into this idiotic idea of young Earth creationism, again, I don't want to believe it, but I'm fairly certain that that's accurate. And I kind of hate that. Really starting to feel like I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
And, you're moved to make Jesus Lord of your life.
Yeah, that's great. And those comments are so encouraging. Just to know that God is using this little show, Creation Magazine Live, to draw people to himself. It makes it all worth it.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, let's get back to the email here. He makes this comment: soft tissue in dinosaur bones does not prove a young anything. And the scientists working on that material understand that, where you don't.
Okay, and Dr. Sarfati's response was, real science shows that there is soft tissue and protein and DNA in dino bones. Real science shows how fast these things break down, especially DNA. What real science does not show is the millions of years dogma. But since the discoverers believed this dogma, they were extremely skeptical at first.
Okay, and now I can tell where you guys are being incredibly disingenuous, and so is Dr. Jonathan, which is honestly very sad for somebody who's actually had published work in Nature. He could do much better than CMI, but instead I guess he's getting paid to lie. The soft tissue issue was a discovery of Dr. Mary Schweitzner. And although multiple tests were done in an attempt to disprove that there was in fact a type of soft tissue discovered, it was ultimately shown that there was a type of soft tissue in Tyrannosaurus rex bones. However, even though the emailer poorly articulated this, they are correct. It really doesn't prove much. And we didn't figure out why until about 2014. This is when we discovered that you could actually preserve soft tissue over a long period of time, i.e. millions of years, if the right circumstances were present for iron and oxygen to actually preserve this soft tissue. The research that was undergone to determine how this type of preservation could occur was headed by Mary Schweitzer herself, as well as many other researchers. The study itself can be found in the United States Library of Medicine, and I will be linking it below for any of you who are curious as to the breakdown of the process. But suffice to say, Dr. Jonathan is either ignorant of this research or blatantly ignoring it for the narrative of a scientific conspiracy that leads to millions of years dogma, when radiometric dating shows millions of years, and anything that seems like it may contradict it is ultimately debunked over time since we understand better the methods of preservation that can allow for fossils to occur. These are things that, as a PhD, you would assume that he either has access to or knew, but given the state of things, I'm gonna go ahead and go out on a limb and say that he's blatantly ignoring this information.
And then he quotes Dr. Mary Schweitzer, who is a pioneer in this area and not a creationist, by the way. She believes that the bones in which she's finding this material really are millions of years old.
That's right, yeah. And you can see her struggle to reconcile her beliefs about the age of the bones with the incredible discoveries that she's making in the lab.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Initially, that is the case, but like I said, after multiple studies confirmed that the soft tissue was in fact what she thought it was, and then she did further research to see why that was the case, now, from what I understand, she's just incredibly frustrated that mooks like you guys are constantly misrepresenting her findings.
Dr. Schweitzer said, when you think about it, the laws of chemistry and biology and everything else that we know say that it should be gone.
That's right.
It should be degraded completely. And no, that's real science.
Yeah.
No, that's quote mining. What should be the case, based on what we understood at the time of her discovery, is that soft tissue shouldn't have existed. But when we found that it did in fact exist, we had to figure out the reasons why. And then we did. And then the world keeps spinning and everything keeps moving as normal. It's like living underground and understanding that light can only ever come from fire, and you should never expect it to come from anywhere else. And then one day you come above ground and witness lightning for the first time. Merely not having an explanation for other phenomenon in your current pool of knowledge doesn't mean that explanation won't be found. It's just sad that at time of making this video, that explanation was found 5 years ago and you guys seem to be behind the curve.
Okay, the rapid decay of organic material is an observation. Anyone who disagrees with that observation can do the test themselves.
Do it yourself, yeah. Throw a piece of meat out on the lawn and you can watch it decay. She also said that when the soft tissue was first discovered, and this is an interesting quote, it was totally shocking, she said. I didn't believe it until we'd done it 17 times. So her beliefs about the bone's age, being millions of years old, caused her to doubt what she was seeing in the lab. So she made absolutely sure that there really was soft tissue and what appear to be blood vessels and blood cells there in a T-Rex bone.
Yeah, right. Dr. Sarfati also mentioned that we are well aware that she has tried to explain the results away, but most unconvincing from the viewpoint of known chemistry.
Yeah.
See dinosaur soft tissue. In seeming desperation, evolutionists turn to iron to preserve the ideas of millions of years.
Oh, so he is aware of that information and he is just lying. Good to know that my previous assumptions were correct. Again, the actual studies are going to be linked in the description below so you guys can see the research for yourself. And her research on this that was done in 2014 is still being cited in other articles, so this research is still relevant and getting used today. This wasn't one evolutionist attempting to explain away something that contradicted the narrative. This is science doing what it has done for years, simply existing. In spite of creationism. Maybe Dr. Jonathan should stick to chess in New Zealand. I hear he's good at that.
So that's a link to an article that outlines a sort of grasping at straws proposal to hold on to the belief that bones are millions of years old.
Right, yeah. Now, iron in blood cells can act as a preservative. It wouldn't be as good as formaldehyde, but for the true believer in millions of years, that's the answer. Iron saves the day. We can keep believing that the bones are millions of years old, even though they contained unfossilized soft tissue, because iron has preserved them.
Right.
Well, it wasn't just iron, it was a combination of iron and oxygen. For example, soft tissue that was taken from an ostrich that should have only lasted about 3 days before breaking down at room temperature was able to be preserved for more than 2 years by using hemoglobin. Oxygen and hemoglobin together allowed for the preservation of soft tissue far beyond the time that it was supposed to decompose. Add on to the fact that iron actually does drastically increase the immunoreactivity of any soft tissue and allows it to resist being broken down by multiple different antibodies. So this is not someone trying to actually just explain away why this soft tissue was preserved. This is an effort to determine the why behind a mechanism we didn't understand, as opposed to doing what you guys have done and just defaulting to God done it. I'm sorry, but you guys aren't even ignorant at this point. You and Dr. Jonathan are literally lying, and you know you're lying.
Okay, but for how long can iron preserve soft tissue?
That's the question, right?
If iron isn't as good a preservative as formaldehyde, could formaldehyde really preserve organic compounds for 70 million years?
No.
Right.
Well, it's a good thing that formaldehyde is not one of the things that we use in determining whether or not a fossil has been preserved long enough. Usually, we find mud and silt to be the preservatives that are used that allow the elements to not get to any particular fossil as it's being formed. Sediment ends up forming on top of the mud and silt and forming it into hard rock. Amber can equally be a useful preservative for the same reasons. It isolates something from the environment. Peat bogs, tar pits, ice, and any number of things can lead to this, so I don't know why you guys are trying to insert formaldehyde into this.
I mean, you can put that bone in formaldehyde, bury it deep in the earth, shield it from any outside energy or chemicals, and it's still going to break down over that unimaginable length of time.
Right.
Because burying a bone in dirt and that being the end of it isn't how a fossil is formed. And I would assume after how many years you guys have been doing the show, you guys would know that.
Yeah.
Formaldehyde doesn't stop decay altogether, it just slows it down.
Right, yeah.
Now, these bones were found in Montana, and they weren't protected the way I just described.
No, they weren't. About the only thing that will stop decay is freezing them to absolute zero, about minus 273 degrees Celsius.
Right, and it doesn't get that cold in Montana.
No, it doesn't.
You don't have to freeze something to absolute zero to preserve it. We haven't been able to actually make anything get to absolute zero, so I don't even know why you're bringing this red herring into the conversation either. And like I said, there are multiple other methods to form a fossil besides just ice. Even if we accepted the bullshit absolute zero method that you're saying is a prerequisite.
So we're following an email sent to the ministry. One of our scientists, Dr. Jonathan Sarfati, responded to it, showing that no, we do not reject modern science. What we do reject is the historical framework that the scientific data is put into.
Right, yes. Now, we really hope that this week's show is an encouragement to those of you who might have been ridiculed in the past for taking a stand for the Bible in this area of the age of the earth. Actually, there's a great article on our website titled 101 Evidences for a Young Age of the Earth and Universe. It's at creation.com/age. And that's an article you could share. You could share that link with people who think it's unscientific to believe in a recent creation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that by pluralizing evidence, I already can't believe anything the article said. Sorry, if I have one trigger, that's it. But that's all of CMI's video that I'm gonna be getting into today. I've got one more part I'm gonna be doing, and that's either gonna be Friday's video or the video that I use to kick off next week. In the meantime, I hope you guys check out the source on dinosaur tissue that I threw down below, and I hope you guys enjoyed a little bit of deconstruction of this video. I hope that I'll be able to see you guys in part 3. Thanks for watching. Please remember to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon, share with your friends, and all that other fun stuff. As always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here.